All right, everyone, welcome. Welcome to this beautiful facility. And my name is Josh Abbott. I am the director of the School of Sustainability, and our faculty are housed in this building. And just want to offer you all a warm welcome to being here today. And I'm just going to offer a few opening remarks and then turn it over to someone else who will also offer some opening remarks. So I'm going to speak here just briefly about the mission of the school. And in the School of Sustainability, our mission is to foster innovative research, impactful education, and engage communities to achieve environmental integrity, social equity, and well-being. This mission has implicitly behind it that sustainability is not just about the environment or environmentalism. Sustainability acknowledges the complex ways in which our lives, our livelihoods, our communities, and our welfare as people are deeply interconnected with nature. So that if we care for the present and the future of our families, our communities, our country, even apart from nature, we would be wise to acknowledge our dependence on the natural environment and want to wisely steward it. We're facing many societal challenges now around climate change, biodiversity loss, the degradation of clean air and water. But we're also facing a profound period of societal fracturing and a deterioration of our civil discourse, both in the US and internationally. Far too much of our shared work as Americans is being undone or laying undone because of partisanship, with some issues becoming labeled as conservative and others being labeled as liberal issues. And there has been, and there always will be, principled reasons for us to disagree in a diverse, pluralistic society like we have. But I would say, as the director of a School of Sustainability, itself a fraught political topic these days, I would submit that we cannot afford for sustainability to be labeled as something that only liberals care about, nor do I think it is something that only liberals care about. The topics of sustainability influence us all, and we're very unlikely to solve them if we don't find common ground and find ways to talk across the political aisle to find solutions. Furthermore, our effectiveness in addressing the challenges posed by sustainability are going to be lessened if we limit our quiver of ideas to only those favored in a particular partisan context. The free exchange of ideas and freedom of inquiry are not just nice to haves here. We need the best ideas, conservative, liberal, or moderate, if we want to address the profound challenges posed by sustainability for our families, our communities, and the nation. And it's in that spirit that we've invited Benji Backer here today. And so with this, I now want to turn over to the other major sponsoring unit for this talk today. I'm going to introduce to you Ross Emmett, who is the director of the Center for the Study of Economic Liberty and a faculty member in the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership. Ross.
Thank you, Josh. We're happy to help sponsor this event. The Center for the Study of Economic Liberty is happy to join in sponsoring this event. On page 95 of Benji's book, he says, if we understand climate change as the result of countless trade-offs in the name of advancement, it's easy to see that finding a solution means deciding on a new set of trade-offs that will help restore balance to our planet. In many ways, every issue that the Center for the Study of Economic Liberty has addressed in the past 7 years could be introduced the same way. It's hard to accept that every issue is trade-offs all the way down. But we keep examining those trade-offs, and we often find gains that can be made. Benji helps to remind us of that, and his optimism, which is it almost like seeps into you as you read. I was smiling many times last night reading through the last couple chapters. Benji helps remind us of that and to keep searching for more and better trade-offs all the time. And with that,
thanks, Ross. I've got my own mic here, I guess. My name is Tyler Drosh, and I'll serve as moderator here today. I'm a faculty member at the School of Sustainability and also the School of Historical, Philosophical, and Religious Studies, the philosophy unit in particular. And I'm honored to present our speaker here today. So Benji Backer is the founder and CEO of Nature is Nonpartisan, a movement redefining the environment as a nonpartisan issue once and for all. He serves as the executive chairman of the American Conservation Coalition, the ACC, the country's largest conservative environmental organization, which he founded during his freshman year of college. Take note, college students, you can make a difference that quickly, really. A best-selling author of The Conservative Environmentalist, which we'll get into today. Benji has been named a New York Times Changemaker and awarded the Fortune 40 under 40, Forbes 30 under 30, GreenBiz 30 under 30, and Grist 50. That's a lot of numbers. Benji is a fellow at the Foundation for Research on Equal Opportunity and is one of the leading youth environmental voices in the country. Above all, Backer is an avid outdoorsman who spends most of his free time in the mountains out west. He's a proud graduate of the University of Washington, and he resides in Scottsdale, Arizona. Please join me in welcoming Benji Backer.
Thank you very much.
For sure. All right, so the format's meant to be pretty open.
Interactive.
It's a fireside chat
No fire.
without a fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my first kind of observation too. We don't have a fire here today.
There's a couple
Is
on
that no? That's not on
Planetsburg.
fire. Not,
It isn't?
No. Let's
I
get
thought
into
it was.
Yeah, let's get into that. So I thought we'd start maybe with you could tell us a little bit about your journey into becoming a conservative environmentalist.
Yeah, well, thank you all for being here today. First of all, I know there's classes and also like the world is the most chaotic I think it's been, at least in my lifetime. And so just appreciate everybody showing up and excited to have a conversation with each of you afterwards. And also please ask questions when we have it open for that section. I grew up in Appleton, Wisconsin, which is about 20 miles from Green Bay. And I grew up just loving the outdoors from the start. I mean, I talk about in the book, I was saving bugs and caterpillars and trying to like basically mess with nature to save every bug from like a spider web when I was little. And that grew into my love of recreating in the outdoors, which, you know, I'm a big hiker, a big skier. And while I was kind of growing my love for the outdoors, I also was becoming active in conservative politics. My family was never active in conservative politics. My parents are actually here right now. But you know, it was never something that was a family thing. It just was something that I wanted to be a part of. I wanted to make a difference in my community. So I asked my parents if I could go downtown Appleton and knock on doors and make phone calls for candidates. And they were like, sure, I guess so. It's a little strange, but you know, they helped me get into that by at least driving me there. And I really felt after a few years of being active in conservative politics, spoke at CPAC my sophomore year of high school, which is the biggest conservative event of the year every year. And then also was on Fox News my freshman year of high school, that my love of the environment and my conservative activism were completely at odds. You know, I've never seen the environment as a partisan issue, and I've never thought it should be caught in the political culture wars that we see today. You know, you think about issues like abortion or immigration, they're naturally drawn to create some division. I think it's worse than it probably needs to be, but it makes sense that there's some division. The fact that the environment and climate change has gotten caught up in that same level of vitriol is a huge disservice to all of us as human beings. And there is no benefit for any of us by having it be caught up in that sort of partisanship. So I was realizing all of that during my freshman year of college, which is when you mentioned I started ACC. And I tweeted out, hey, I'm going to start a conservative organization or an organization dedicated to getting conservatives active on the environment again. Because again, I felt completely left behind by my side on it. And fast forward to today, that organization has 65,000 activists, big staff, big presence in DC, and really has created a groundswell of support for climate and environmental action on the right. Obviously today, what we're seeing is kind of a reversion of some of the progress that we've made, but there's also a lot of opportunities ahead that I'm really optimistic about. So that's kind of the journey. And then, yeah, I recently founded Nature's Nonpartisan, which I've teamed up with. Half our team is liberal, half of it's conservative, half our board is liberal, half of it's conservative. We are trying to recreate what the environmental movement used to be in America, which is a truly nonpartisan movement. There's not a single organization that really does that right now. And you've got groups on the left and you've now got a group on the right, which is great, but there's nobody that's spanning the center of the United States. And the rational majority of Americans want the same things when it comes to the environment. They want healthier and cleaner communities for their kids. They want forests to be restored and wildlife habitat to be restored. They want our public lands to be protected. They want to be able to recreate in the outdoors and have those ecosystems thriving. They want clean air and clean water. I mean, they want abundant energy choices. They don't want to be, told that it's just fossil fuels or just solar and wind. They want to have the cheapest energy on the grid that is as clean as possible. I mean, these are common sense things that our politicians aren't listening to right now because they're so focused on getting into their own personal brand and growing division so they can get ahead when Americans actually want a lot of the same things. So we're dedicated to showing politicians that there is this common ground that exists and that we expect them to do something about it and not just sit on the sidelines and stoke division.
Very cool. How has the ACC been received on the left and on the right?
Yeah, honestly, the response has been very mixed from both sides, right? Because I think we're really good at pissing off the polar extremes. Right. Well, actually, when I launched,
that's when you know you're doing something right.
That's what I keep telling myself when I go to bed every night, hoping that that's true. I think when you look at, I think a perfect microcosm of this is when I launched Nature's Nonpartisan a few weeks ago. We had a huge level of attack from the far left saying that we were founded by the Trump White House to promote Trump and to greenwash the MAGA movement and to basically create a movement that supports Trump and his degradation of the environment is what they called it. And then we also had a far right group that put out all these attacks saying that we were just the Green New Deal reincarnated and that we were branding that in a softer way so that people didn't get upset. And I'm like, I was having an identity crisis. I'm like, which one of these are we? Because we can't be both, that's for sure. But I think it's just a perfect example of how unexpected something that's trying to build bridges is these days. Like there's got to be some hidden motive, right? But behind all of this, and there really isn't. So, building that trust, I think, is going to take some time. And I honestly, to be honest, I don't blame people for being skeptical because right now everything is so divisive and chaotic that it's hard to parse through the noise and believe that there's not some ulterior motive to everything that people are doing. But I think when we look back in 50 years, the people who are still alive that were critiquing us today would be proud of what we're going to build. And that's really what we're dedicated to doing. And I know that trust has to be earned, right? ACC, which is, again, a separate organization that I started, is continued to do really well since I left running it day to day. But that organization actually, I think, is received better by the left and the right because it makes more sense to people because it is putting things in a box, right? You're saying we are conservative and we're dedicated to getting the environment to be a priority. And so people kind of expect it to toe a partisan line a little bit. They expect it to be more conservative. And so well-intentioned left-leaning people appreciate that it's at least trying to push the needle. And right-leaning people are grateful that they have a voice in the conversation. We've received more pushback about starting a nonpartisan group than we did over starting the conservative group, which I find fascinating. But I think, again, trust is earned, and we're going to continue to show that this movement is possible. I think really what it comes down to, the easiest way to explain what we're trying to do is in 1990, does anyone guess what percentage of Americans self-identified as environmentalists? Any guesses? 15? Others? 70. You're close. 79%.
Wow.
79% of Americans in 1990 self-identified as environmentalists. That number today is 38%. So we are sitting in an auditorium at a school that is leading at the forefront of sustainability, that is dedicating hundreds of millions, billions of dollars to this cause. There are dozens of schools like that elsewhere. That didn't exist in 1990. We didn't have the same level of discourse on this topic in 1990 as we do today. And yet half of the belief back then is still apparent today in terms of people self-identifying as environmentalists. So the problem isn't that people don't care. It's that, I mean, I think the level of care has increased, to my point about all these universities and so many people dedicating their life to this cause. It's that it's gotten so partisan that people can't engage if they feel like they're on one side or the other. And everyone's starting to use different language. They're starting to use different words. And I think the most frustrating part about it is that as I've traveled around the country, I've been to almost every state multiple times to try to understand where they're coming from on this issue. Every single time I go to Midland, Texas, the heart of the oil and gas country, or I go to downtown New York City, they're saying the same thing in a different way. And so it pains me to watch the national discourse on this issue because it's so displaced from the reality on the ground. And as I was mentioning earlier, there are certain things that every community I've gone to supports. And so when I go to a liberal place and they're saying they want all these environmental things to happen, and then they talk about conservatives and they're like, but they don't care, they hate the environment, they want to burn the planet to the ground at the expense of all of us. I hear kind of the same thing on the right when I go to those communities as well about the left. They're trying to they basically say that the left is trying to greenwash the environment for climate change so that they can use it as a Trojan horse to get liberal policies done and not actually improve the environment at all. And neither side would believe that the other side is saying that. Like, liberal people would never believe that these oil and gas people in Texas are talking about how they actually think they care about the environment more than the people in New York City. And it's just this huge disconnect that has to be changed. And so people get frustrated that, I'm not every day calling out the Trump administration on what they're doing wrong. People got really upset when I wasn't doing that with Biden either. But the reality is, any defense played against the craziness that's going on right now is just a Band-Aid over this longer term problem that exists that's not getting any better until we fix the root of it, which is this disconnect of partisanship on the issue, this disconnect between rural America and urban America, and this disconnect on understanding that we have so much in common, more than we ever could imagine. And until we show politicians that and realize it ourselves first, we will never, ever get the environmental solutions that we want, ever.
So I do want to get into your book a little bit, but before I do, is there a tension between like nature is nonpartisan and the Conservative Environmentalist, the title of your book?
So that's a great question. I actually made, I might be the world's worst capitalist, I realized after this book was put out. Because when I was talking to my publisher about the title of the book, it was my idea to put the words conservative and environmentalist in the same title, because I'm like, you know what? It's proving the point, right? You can be a conservative and you can be an environmentalist, and it'll catch both sides' attention. Conservatives will be like, wait, I can be an environmentalist? And environmentalists are going to say, wait, a conservative cares about the environment? But instead, people looked at the title and were like, conservatives were like, oh, environmentalist? I'm not buying that. And environmentalists were like, conservative? I'm not buying that. And I joke, but I think people, it actually, I think, is a perfect example of nature being nonpartisan. That you can be a conservative and you can be an environmentalist. You be a liberal and be a conservationist. You be a liberal and a capitalist. You can be a vegan and you can be a conservative. You can be a truck driving liberal. Like, our chief marketing officer at Nature's Nonpartisan is a huge hunting and fishing advocate, loves going out there, and she's super liberal. I mean, she's one of the most liberal people I know. And then we have some of the most conservative people. I mean, I hate to throw my parents out there, but they're vegetarian vegans and they're conservative. So we put ourselves in these boxes, and the title of the book was trying to show people that maybe that's not accurate, right? Maybe these boxes that we put ourselves in don't actually tell the full story of who we are as people. And, if you start to realize that everyone is just every single person on this planet is just, their views are created from their own life experience, right? Everyone's life experience is so different that you can't be 100% conservative or 100% liberal. And the things you've dealt with on a day-to-day basis have informed that. But I mean, I know so many gun-loving liberals and so many pro-choice conservatives. I mean, we've just really screwed ourselves over by putting ourselves in these boxes. So I don't think it's contradictory. I think it's helpful. But I think most people are so ingrained in thinking it's one way or the other that a title like that makes them feel like you're actually catering to the other side. Like conservatives feel like it's catering to the left, and the liberals think it's catering to the right. And that's a constant struggle. But I think we all need to realize that reality that we've created for ourselves, that the media has created, that social media has created as well, is not accurate, and that we deserve better than to put ourselves in those boxes. And what better way to show that we can actually see eye to eye on something, even if we disagree on how to get there, than the environment. I mean, it's the one issue that I think could help break this polarization that we're in. Because at the end of the day, my belief is that immigration doesn't matter, abortion doesn't matter, none of these issues matter if we continue to have the polarization and tribalism in this country, because I think that's going to tear us apart before and make all those issues seem irrelevant. And we're already seeing that today. Think about the ping-ponging back and forth. I mean, is anyone else sick of that? Every single day we wake up and it's undoing something that the left did and not coming up with a plan. And then the left does the same thing every time that they get in office. And you can say it's worse now or it's worse then or whatever. Both sides would say it's worse when their party's not in office. I'm sick of it. What better way to fix the root cause of that problem than to start pushing on the one thing that we all are impacted by in the same exact way? If you're in New York and Central Park's degraded, New York is screwed. If you're in New York and the sea level rises, they're screwed. Just as much as when the weather changes in the Midwest, farmers are screwed. When there's a drought in the Midwest, we're all reliant on the planet that we live on to survive. We should start to work together on that, because if we do, we can show that that's possible on other issues.
Good. I like that message. So what are some key policy proposals or initiatives that you advocate for in balancing environmental stewardship on the one hand with conservative values?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is that the top-down approach, I think, should be flipped when it comes to the environment. I think we should start from a bottom-up approach. Now, people misperceive that as the government doesn't have any role. That's not what I'm saying. I think we need to start at the local level to see what we can solve there first, then go to the state level, and then go to the federal level as the last resort. That doesn't mean that that last resort isn't used, right? And my fear in relying on the federal government to solve every problem is kind of on the last point I was trying to make. Do you really trust a Congress full of AOCs and Marjorie Taylor Greens to solve problems? Do you really think that relying on that is the most effective way to get to a solution? I sure as heck don't. So starting at the local and the state level is the best way, the fastest way to get good policies done. And I also think leaning on the marketplace and innovation is really strong as well. You think about the role that Toyota played with creating the Prius and reducing emissions. You think of the role that Elon Musk and Tesla played that now all these other companies are playing a role in. And I know even bringing up Elon Musk is crazy these days. I mean, if we did a study 5 years ago of young people and the environmental leader they looked up to the most. And like Greta Thunberg had like a 25% support. Elon Musk had 95, and that number is probably way lower today. But my point is, innovation is exciting to people. Innovation also provides a lot of great solutions that we've seen in improving our planet. This university is at the forefront of so many of those things. So, twisting this issue on its head to say, can we lean on the marketplace and innovation and entrepreneurship and young people to come up with the next generation of solutions, and then also lean more on local and state governments? I lived in Seattle for 6 years, and you lived in British Columbia. One of the reasons I overcorrected and moved here was because I hated how rainy it was there. They tried to mandate solar panels in Seattle while I was there. And I'm just, do the math in your head, folks. I mean, it doesn't make sense, right? That's like trying to create a new hydropower plant over in the Superstition Mountains, okay? It's not gonna work. So local solutions instead of this one-size-fits-all approach is often better. And I'm not saying that's the end-all be-all, but local governments, local states tend to make better solutions for themselves. and say, having the federal government come in and say, we need to hit all these targets by this date in the same way just ends up not working. And I look at the states that are doing the best on the environment, where this sort of bottom-up first approach is working, and kind of at the state level. And you look at a state like Georgia or a state like Maryland, both of them over the last 10 years have had Democrat and Republican governors, both of which have led on this. All of the policies have passed in a bipartisan way. None of them have been caught up in a Marjorie Taylor Greene AOC food fight, and they all have lowered energy prices and improved the environment and decreased emissions. Those are the sorts of durable solutions that you can get at the state and local level a lot easier than you can get at the federal level. And I think that it has to be better balanced in that way.
Cool. I guess we touched on this a little bit, but I thought maybe you could provide a more pointed response to the question. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you see in promoting environmentalism within conservative circles, especially among conservatives who are really skeptical about being an environmentalist or even, endorsing some kind of environmental cause?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think most people who are left of center. So I actually went into this. Everyone thought I was super liberal when I started ACC, because I was kind of your traditional environmentalist. I was like, the right just totally doesn't understand. The fossil fuel lobby's out to hurt everybody. Every conservative politician that denies climate change is evil. Like, that was my thought process, even as a right-leaning person. And what I quickly realized is that if you take away the noise and the rhetoric from like the big names that probably do know better than what they're talking about, most everyday people are just really fearful that climate policies are going to come for their livelihoods. I was in Midland, Texas, talking to oil and gas workers there, and these people, every free chance they get on the weekends after they've had this grueling job, they go hunting, fishing, hiking. They love the outdoors. And what they don't want is somebody coming in and saying, you're not allowed to have your job anymore. You need to go pound sand. You're evil, right? And good luck with the rest of your life. And that's how it's come across to those communities. Farmers too, ranchers too, foresters, all these people who have dedicated their lives to providing the resources that we use on a day-to-day basis that have kept our lights on for generations. Does that mean that different industries don't have to change? No. But can we acknowledge the important role they've played and also try to work with them on the solutions so they don't feel like they're just cast aside? That's what I think that the center point of direction needs to be headed in. And there's so much work that needs to be done to build better relationships with rural America. I speak, next week I'm speaking at a couple Earth Week events in New York City and DC. Every time I go to one of these events, I'm the token conservative. And if anyone knows anything about me, and my friend Judah here roasts me about it all the time, I'm the most moderate person you've ever met. So the token conservative, it doesn't even really touch conservatism, okay? But I'm the token conservative, the token person from rural America, because I grew up in Wisconsin, and really the token person that brings any different perspective from any of these events. I've gone to COPs at the UN. I've gone to, I've kicked off Climate Week in San Francisco and New York. It's this echo chamber of coastal elitism that people are really frustrated by. And it's not intentional. These people are not poorly intentioned. It's just they haven't been able to understand where a decent chunk of the country is coming from in terms of their frustration. And the longer that bridge isn't connected, the worse it's going to get, right? The worse the chasm is going to be created on. So, and I'm only one person, right? I can only go to so many rural communities and so many conservative communities and try to build that bridge. I mean, we need thousands of climate activists or environmental activists doing that. And it kind of goes back to my earlier point. A solution for New York City or San Francisco or Seattle or some of these places that have so many climate activists and a lot of the policies coming out of it, the solutions that work for those places are not the same as the solutions that work in Middle America. I was on an interview with PBS earlier today, and one of the questions was like, people just want to build mass transit and mass public transit all over the country, and it's just, why isn't that happening? I'm like, have you been to most parts of the country? That's like actually not possible. Like trying to connect Page, Arizona to Phoenix through mass transit, like we have a huge country and these people have to have the trucks to do the work that they do. They have to haul the hay. They have to do that work, but they also are so far away from most of this country, most of the population centers of this country. And together, it's a huge group of our country's population. So to say that we should all just do these kind of urban-centric policies has really made them feel left behind. And so I think it's just a matter of building that bridge. Again, there's no ill intent, and I think that that's the problem too, is that the people in these rural communities, these conservative communities, assume malintent from the climate activists or from the urban folks, and there is none. They're trying to do the right thing. But I think we just misunderstand each other a lot and the needs that we have on a day-to-day basis. The other thing I'll just say is a lot of the policies, so I'll preface this by saying I very much disagree with the undo everything approach that Donald Trump's taking right now. So let me just say that. I also very much disagree with the approach that someone like Gavin Newsom in California has taken, where he mandated electric vehicles by 2030 and then moved to 2035 and mandated solar and wind only, originally to shut down nuclear and natural gas, and now he's more open to nuclear. Energy prices there are 3 times the national average now. Energy reliability is at an all-time low in the last 50 years there. People, like my sister lives there, they have blackouts. They get almost all their power from overseas now. They use more oil and gas today than they did 10 years ago. And 80% of it comes from Ecuador, Iraq, Iran, and Venezuela. They import 80% of Utah's coal production at night so they can have lights on in the middle of the night. Is that good for the environment? You're increasing people's energy prices by 3 times, and then you're decreasing reliability, and you're actually harming the environment at the same time. So we have this problem where the right assumes that every policy that the left is proposing is going to be like Gavin Newsom's and is super scared of that, right? They don't want that. And then the left's super frustrated about what's happening right now, and they don't want that either. And so I think that to go back to your question, conservatives just are fearful of left-leaning policies, just as much as liberals are fearful of right-leaning policies. And it's almost like if we work together on the policies, maybe we won't have to be so fearful about it.
So you expressed disagreement with the Trump administration and their moves, and you also expressed disagreement with Gavin Newsom's policies in California. What does Benji's Arizona look like?
Well, I think Arizona actually has done unintentionally or intentionally a very good job. When I go to other countries, the model for water policy in the United States is Arizona, and around the world is Arizona, because of the canal systems that we've built, the ability to direct water in a smart way. And I know we've got a lot of work to do, and there's definite challenges ahead. But I think we should address the fact that we've done a really good job of it. And when people point to a place where they've at least got it on the right direction, it's Arizona. So I think we should be proud of that. I also think Arizona has taken a very smart all-the-above energy approach. We have the left now talking about this thing called energy abundance, which I think is really great. Ezra Klein, if you haven't seen, has been putting out a lot of stuff. I think it's really incredible. There's a lot of alignment there. Arizona is a home for nuclear power. It's a home for natural gas. It's a home for solar. It's a home for wind. And energy prices are pretty stable. My parents have solar panels on their roof, but we also know that the nuclear and the natural gas is going to be on when we need it to be on. And if you look at the states that are doing the best job on the energy side of things, they have this diversity of energy sources. And they're building more renewables, but they're keeping the 24/7 power that nuclear and natural gas provides as well. And I think that transition towards cleaner energy, but also not shutting down things just because it doesn't sound good to us, is probably the best approach. So I think on water policy and on energy, there's a great kind of model here. There's definitely work to do, but I think it's a really strong state when it comes to those things. And also the state parks and the active conservation of the public lands here is really great as well. It's one of the best run state park systems in the country. And it's a net positive to the state budget in most years because they're doing it right. They're not wasting money, and they're also raising it because people who recreate there are paying their dues to be there. So I think it's, a state like this, there's more states doing it right actually than are doing it wrong. And I think that's something I haven't talked about enough today, which is that there's actually a lot of good news and optimism around the country on this issue. I think California's doing it wrong, and New York's doing it wrong, and I think Texas is doing it wrong, and maybe Florida's doing it wrong. But there's 50 states, and I actually think a lot of them who are not feeding into the culture wars of the issue, trying to go all renewables or all oil and gas, all EVs or all banning EVs, right? Any of the states that are not falling into that, which is most of them, are actively reducing their emissions and making energy more reliable and protecting their local ecosystems. I was in Italy and Hungary and the UK in the fall, and all of them were talking about how they wished their country was more like the United States in terms of their balance of energy and conservation and the environment. And so again, we aren't doing things perfectly, and there are examples of things I'm frustrated by, but over time, we're making progress. The United States is leading the world in reducing carbon emissions. We're leading the world in conservation of our ecosystems, and we can focus on the negatives. And unfortunately, that negative is kind of always showcased at the federal level. But in states and in communities like Georgia, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, liberal and conservative states, they're making progress on helping people and helping the planet. And that combination is going to bring us to a better future.
So what advice do you have for young people who might be interested in engaging with environmental issues from a conservative perspective?
Well, I think I would just make it more about my advice to young people in general, which is that there's nothing our generation can't do. And I've seen that firsthand. There are some people who doubt me because of my age. There's still people who doubt me because of my age. But the vast majority of people, kind of like the vast majority of states making progress, it's easy to focus on the people who are not helpful. But the vast majority of people want young leaders in their companies, in their schools, in their government institutions, research institutions to be the leader of a lot of this dialogue. I've felt like my age is a benefit to doing the work that I do. And so whether you want to start a company that's focused on sustainability, or you want to work in politics and focus on sustainability, or you want to run for office, there is a huge market out there of people who want you to help on the environmental side of things. And I've never believed in kind of the wait your turn mentality. Go and do it, right? There's nothing stopping you, and the people who are stopping you are wrong. So you just keep going, right? And that takes risk, and it takes a lot of assertiveness. And I'm not saying that they're, being kind of working your way up in the system isn't the right approach for a lot of people. It is. But people want young, youthful voices and leaders in their different ecosystems. And I think we have a huge opportunity to make the change that we want on this issue. I feel so lucky that I get to wake up every day and call this my job, right? Like, that's crazy. And, the 10-year-old me would be so proud of that, right? That is harder to do on most issues than it is on the environment. Mm-hmm. It's hard to wake up every day and call social justice or abortion rights or whatever, like, your job. There are trillions of dollars being put into this from an economic perspective. Everyone's looking for solutions because we don't have them all. It's the time to be a part of the solution yourself. And that could be anything. It could be at a nonprofit, or it could be becoming the next billionaire, right? It doesn't matter. And there's so much opportunity to get involved. And it's almost overwhelming, right? There are so many nonprofits in this space, so many startups, so many different things, but there's definitely a home for every single person that wants to dedicate their career to this.
Yeah, cool. All right, we have about 5 more minutes left of maybe a few more questions that I'll ask, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So what do you envision as the future of environmental advocacy within the conservative movement? Where are you guys going?
Well, the conservative movement has to be at the table.
Yeah.
And it can't just be undoing the left's ideas. What we're working on is trying to tell the president and any other conservative, which is going to be true in 5 years, if another conservative is in power, that we expect solutions, and you can't just undo things. You have to provide your own ideas, and that it's your time to say, this cat and mouse game is annoying and unnecessary. So I'm gonna be the first one. It's like a couple that's bickering, right? Somebody's got to be the first bigger person in the room to say, okay, I actually want to solve this. And that's really where I think the conservative movement should head right now. And if they don't do it, then the liberal movement needs to do it, right? So I think it's really asserting the fact that they want to be at the table and to say, okay, our goal is to put together the biggest bipartisan investment in the environment since Teddy Roosevelt. That's what they need to say. And America's legacy is largely around our beautiful environment. We're about to celebrate 250 years of us being a country. We used to work on this in a bipartisan way. Let's get some really big things done and passed. Our forests are mismanaged and under-resourced. Our national parks are $23 billion in debt. We have a severe water infrastructure crisis in the West, mostly in other cities, but also here. I mean, there's a lot of real challenges that we have to solve. It will be a big investment in terms of making our country a stronger place environmentally. Let's work on that together. And conservatives leading that would be a historical change, and I think would set a new precedent that engagement across the aisle is now the norm. And I hope to God that it would always stay that way. And it's our prerogative and it's our priority to make sure it stays that way. And if it doesn't happen now, it needs to happen in the next few years. And if conservatives don't sit at the table, they're not going to like the solutions. And honestly, both sides, when they don't like the solutions, it's kind of their fault for not being at the table. Conservatives better get there, otherwise they're going to keep hating what they get. When you're not cooking the meal, you don't get to choose what's on the table, and they need to get in the kitchen.
Right. So the director of SOS, the School of Sustainability, Josh Abbott, he opened today by saying that sustainability, the very concept of sustainability, it should be nonpartisan. It should be a no-brainer, that it's something that is everyone's concern, no matter your political affiliation. So the last question that I have relates to this topic. So at the School of Sustainability, we often encounter the perception that sustainability is inherently tied to left-leaning politics. I hear this from my students in class, and they're worried about, what their degree looks like from the outside now. But many of us believe that caring for the planet, future generations, responsible stewardship of resources, they should transcend political ideology. How do we reframe sustainability so that it's embraced across the political spectrum? What advice do you have for making sustainability a truly nonpartisan issue?
It's a really, really great question. I mean, if I had all the answers, we wouldn't even be here today because we would have solved it by now. First of all, just showing up here and being engaged in this discourse from a nonpartisan perspective and not just from a partisan perspective is the first step. I think going back to some earlier points, I don't think we understand each other on the topic. It's funny because I work with pollsters about language, and we called this organization Nature is Nonpartisan because nature is one of 4 words that's not polarizing that's related to the environment. Environment, conservation, stewardship, and nature are the only words related to the environment that aren't coded with some sort of political ideology. Sustainability is, to your student's point, eco, green, climate, environmentalist, they're all evoking something. So for people who are skeptical of those things, understanding why, I was speaking at an event in Miami, and this girl was like, afterwards was like, I can't talk to my dad about climate change because he doesn't believe it exists. And so I just don't bring it up anymore. And I'm like, you should consider asking him why he's so hesitant to engage on the topic. She messaged me a few days later saying, I totally get it now. Because she now understands why. It's not that she doesn't care. I mean, he raised her, and the thing she was saying was like, it makes no sense because he loves the environment. He's always taught me to care about the environment. Now he suddenly doesn't. And I'm like, maybe that's not what happened. So I think we need to do a better job of truly understanding what words we're using and how we're conveying this to each other. I know it sounds really stupid and cliche, but it's definitely true. And then I also think, again, our leaders, though, have a duty to show us what that looks like. But also we need to celebrate that as people. You can hate Ron DeSantis or you can hate Governor Newsom, but if they turned on a dime and said, I'm going to work across the aisle on energy or conservation, can we not try to primary them because they worked with the other side, please? That's not necessarily a bad thing to work across the aisle. And it's not necessarily even a compromise of your values. It's oftentimes a collaboration of your values, not a compromise of your values. I was talking about that earlier today too. I was like, it's almost like a compromise in politics oftentimes means both sides are getting what they want, maybe a little less severe than how they wanted it, but they're both getting what they want instead of just one of them getting what they want. But they're not throwing away getting what they want. So I think politicians need to show that. But when it happens, we need to be celebrating that and say, if Donald Trump did the biggest investment in the environment tomorrow, saying, I didn't vote for him, I never would vote for him, but I applaud him on this. That's the sort of approach we need as Americans to at least show that there's an appetite across the spectrum to doing the right thing. So I think it's a matter of understanding each other better and communicating in a way that resonates with both sides, but also understanding that your enemy isn't necessarily your enemy on 100% of issues, right? They might be your enemy on immigration or whatever, but they might not be your enemy on this. And by working with them, you actually both benefit more than when you don't. And it's not a compromise of your values, it's a collaboration of your values. And when you collaborate on your values, you get long-lasting results that don't get undone by the next administration. And that's what our environment needs.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're going to open it up to questions. I think we'll start in the room, and then we also have an audience on Zoom. I believe we do. Anyway, there was some. Do we have some? Okay. Yeah. So
go ahead.
Then there's somebody.
Say your name and
somebody going around with Mike. And Benji told me he wants hardball questions.
I do.
So.
The harder the question, the better. Oh, we'll go to her and then back in the back.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm very passionate about this myself as a conservative and an environmentalist.
There's two of us.
Yeah, at least two. But a question I have for you that I've seen, perhaps especially in conservative discourse around the issue, is how to deal with the unanticipated trade-offs or externalities that arise from the innovative side. For example, the more EVs are on the road, the more microplastics from tires we put into the environment because they're so heavy, the more we break down infrastructure that needs replacing faster. So do you think there's an approach that, probably particularly from the conservative angle, we should take on that, or is it a more case-by-case basis?
It's a really good question. And I think the fact that that even is a question is part of the solution, because when you have these trade-offs that we inherently have, like there's no perfect solution to anything, like solar panels, EVs, et cetera, they create a whole bunch of other problems. Instead of writing the whole thing off, like the right has done, unfortunately, it's just, we should be saying, can we manage those new trade-offs with other technologies that make that better, right? Like we are always managing, I mean, you made a great point earlier, we're always managing trade-offs. There's never a stop to the trade-offs. So how can we minimize the trade-offs? Just because something is new and has a lot of challenges associated with it doesn't mean we can't also solve some of those challenges associated with it. And of course, like, I mean, there's been so much innovation even in the last 5 years about making batteries smaller and making them more efficient and making tires that have less microplastics. And maybe some of these things can't be solved, but we should give it a try, right? And I think that, you know, what we do is we write off something when we hear something that's negative about it. Oh, nuclear has nuclear waste. It's probably really dangerous. Oh, fossil fuels, it probably is going to cause an earthquake in my community. Solar panels, that's causing a lot of mining in places that we don't want in slave labor. Oh, what are we going to be left with? We've got nothing, right? If we're constantly only worrying about the negatives instead of solving for the negatives. And that's a difference in approach that I think we need to have. And it is kind of on a case-by-case basis because each solution to those trade-offs is different than the rest. And I mean, that's true with everything that we do. And I think it's just a matter of people accepting that these trade-offs will never stop, but that we can minimize each one of them until they're at the least amount of, you know, impact as possible. Thanks for the question. And again, asking the question about the problems with those is how you get the solutions, though. And that's where I don't like when people are like people read my book and they're like, you're so critical of EVs, you must hate EVs. Like, why, are you bought out by the fossil fuel industry? I'm like, no, I'm begging the question that there are these negatives associated. Let's solve for those negatives. I'm not saying we should, I literally drive an EV, okay? Like, I care about having EVs, but let's be smart about it and let's not just blanket say it's all good, Because if it is, then our planet actually hurts more than it can benefit.
There's a question in the back next.
Hi, thanks for being here. This is really interesting. And I'm a philosopher. I'm a fan of productive dialogue. That's what I try to do in the world. And there's a lot of things kind of in the way of productive dialogue right now. But I think, as you say, one of the things that we have on our side is that we agree about the values. And so like we can stick to this, that we agree about the values. But it's not clear that we have the other piece of productive dialogue, which is that we don't agree about the facts. And so I worry that to have this kind of nonpartisan engagement and conversation, we need some kind of like base level in touchness with reality about what's happening and what's effective and what's possible. Like you yourself cite a lot of facts about what's happening, productive and possible. And so I just wonder if part of the nonpartisan movement here has to be kind of defending truth and defending education and defending science and defending our access to this knowledge so that we can continue participating in that conversation. And I was wondering if you think that that has any space for that conversation in Nature is Nonpartisan.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, we are operating from a completely different set of truths and facts, and I would call those falsehoods because they're not truths. And I mean, the reality is truth and facts are always evolving, right? Like we're always finding out new information about different things. And we have to adopt that mentality of nothing's ever like finalized in terms of what we know about the world. But at the same time, we, to the best of our knowledge in that moment, can we take the facts as what they are with the open-mindedness that could change? And that, I would actually argue that both sides really struggle with that. Because I've sat down with a lot of climate scientists on the East Coast who said that they hated the Green New Deal more than they hated the climate deniers because the climate or the Green New Deal kind of alarmist folks were misrepresenting the severity of the science to the point where people weren't taking it seriously. And they're like, this isn't actually what the science says. It says that it's a problem that's going to cause problems over time, but that we're not going to die tomorrow and it's not doomsday. And we should be optimistic that we could help solve some of these challenges. And so the discourse, like both extremes are dictating their own emotional set of falsehoods that they're perpetuating to us. And none of them are rooted in facts. They're rooted in emotion and honestly really selfish motives. So I think what we need to do is start normalizing the best available information with each other in a way that's authentic to who we're talking to. Like when my chief marketing officer, who's a hunter and angler, goes into her community and talks about the importance of conservation and hunting and angling for conservation, when she talks to liberals about that, they're going to listen more to her than they are going to listen to me. And that's okay, right? We need to have authentic messengers who understand people to go in and help them understand the realities that like hunting and fishing is good for the environment. And just like I can go into a Republican's congressional office and talk about the facts about climate change, and they're going to listen to me more than they listen to somebody who's like a Sierra Club person. So I think for those of us who do want to be associated with the facts and not just get caught up in emotion, being authentic messengers of maybe correcting our own side. Like we all have a leaning, right? You might lean left or right, and I might lean left or right. That could change over time. But going into authentic communities, that could be your parents, it could be your siblings, or it could be the next president of the United States, has to be at the forefront of how we convey truth. Because right now, our politicians are operating from a set of falsehoods that have no bearing on truth. And it shows a lot. I mean, our news isn't news, it's entertainment. And I think that there are some serious societal problems that come from that. And again, I think the environment is one of those topics where maybe we can pierce through the noise. Would I say that I'm confident that's going to happen? No. But we might as well try, right? Like that's all we've got is giving it a shot. So, you're talking about my book seeps optimism. That's all I can give, right? We have no other option but to give things a chance and push through and hope that at some point things work out, because it's sure as hell going to be bumpy along the way, right? So we might as well push through this BS that we're living with and hope for the best. And if it doesn't work out, at least we gave it a shot. I'm optimistic that if we all changed our mindsets room by room of how we engage on these topics, we would change the world in the way that we wanted to. And it's up to all of us to do that.
I think there's a question on Zoom. Is that right, Cindy? Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to paraphrase. This is from Gabriel. In regards to your desire that solutions should be looked for at the local level first, how can we make true progress at a local level when the MAGA agenda is working hard to stifle local and state projects that advance clean energy and environmental justice?
Yeah, so just for those who didn't hear, the question was about how can we work at the local level when the federal government right now is trying to undo some of the progress made at the local and state level. First of all, I think this is also the risk of relying on the federal government for these grants and for these incentives, because it can get undone at any point, especially like the IRA. So I think I'm just going to talk about it through the lens of the IRA because that's the best way to address this. The Inflation Reduction Act, biggest climate investment of all time, didn't have anything to do with inflation and was passed 51 to 49 in the Senate. Okay, no Republicans voted for it. Now it's at risk of being undone. That doesn't happen if you work across the aisle. That doesn't happen if you try to find that common ground. And I can tell you from being in DC during that time that Democrats and Republicans both, it wasn't just Republicans, intentionally made that partisan. They intentionally didn't work across the aisle. If you look back at how the Democrats did the IRA, it was on a reconciliation package that they basically bypassed any input from Republicans to get it done on purpose because they didn't want to have anything upheld. But when you do that, you have the risk of what's happening right now. And I'm not justifying it. What I'm saying is that this is predictable. And anytime we do this again in the future, it's going to have that same exact risk. So we might as well, again, try to change that course. So I think our politicians screwed up in that way. And I wouldn't say that stifles the ability to have local and state leadership because they can do it on their own. They don't necessarily need the federal government to always come in and save them. So I wouldn't say that that's the only way. Now, what I will say is that having local and state government involvement in the IRA was very smart by the Democrats because a lot of Republicans, 21 Republicans in the House and 8 Senate Republicans have signed letters asking their leadership to not undo the tax credits in the IRA. That list will grow because the benefits are being seen at the local and state level. So my answer to your question would be, one, we should still stop doing things in a partisan way so that this doesn't have a risk of being undone, and not rely on that at the local and state level to do things. But two, when you craft policies, even if you kind of screw up on the fact that it's done in a partisan way and you include local and state governments all over the country, it does increase the likelihood of it sticking. And I don't think the IRA tax credit investments will be undone. I hope this recording isn't used against me in 5 years saying that I predicted that it was wrong. But that's my hunch because I've seen Republicans get excited about the benefits that has in their community. And when you design policies to benefit both sides of the aisle, it has a higher likelihood of sticking.
Great. We have time for one last short question.
So glad you're here.
Thank you.
Benji, what makes you a conservative?
Oh boy, the big questions.
What I'm hearing a lot.
Like the first date, it's like passing this test is the big one. I think it's my belief. First of all, I firmly believe that America is the greatest country in the world. And a lot of these things that I'm about to say, I think today the partisanship has blinded our country so much that I don't really know what conservatives and liberals stand for anymore because I think they both are contradicting themselves constantly. So let me just preface that. I would say I lean right and that I'm conservative because I believe America is the best country in the world. I believe that innovation and capitalism can solve most problems when they're approached, especially through a moral standpoint, which I think most people are inherently good people trying to do the right thing. And that when you give people the tools to do that and allow them the independence to go out and do their own thing, that by and large, society will benefit from that. I believe that freedom and economic opportunity are some of the most important things that we have as a bedrock of society. And I believe that America and its ingenuity and our ability to solve problems is largely due to limited government, not no government, but limited government. and that we screw up, but we fix those screw ups fairly quickly compared to other places. And that's because the government's not dictating everything for us. It's because we are constantly fixing these trade-offs that you brought up earlier, because the innovation and the capitalism and the things that we do in this country breed benefits for people around the world and raise people's livelihoods into a better place. So that's what makes me conservative. But I know that a lot of liberal people also believe in those values. And so I have no problem being called a liberal, and I have no problem being called a conservative. I'm a human, and I'm an American, and I believe in our country, and I believe that we can have a more optimistic future, and I don't care what party people are. That's the vision that I have.
All right, and with that, we are at time, so we'll end it here.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you, Benji.
Appreciate this. Thanks for being here.
And lucky for us, if you want to continue this conversation, we're going to be exiting through these rear doors, and there's snacks,